Hello, everyone. Today we are going to learn Chapter 14, Multinational Capital Budgeting. The learning objectives include 1. Compare the capital budgeting analysis of an MNC's subsidiary versus its parent. 2. Demonstrate how multinational capital budgeting can be applied to determine whether an international project should be implemented. 3. Show how multinational capital budgeting can be adapted to account for special situations such as alternative exchange rate scenarios or when subsidiary financing is considered. 4. Explain how the risk of international projects can be assessed. Subsidiary versus parent perspective. 1. Tax differentials. Different tax rates may make a project feasible from a subsidiary's perspective, but not from a parent perspective. The second factor is a restriction on remitted earnings. The third one is exchange rate movement. The parent's perspective is appropriate when evaluating the project, since the parent's shareholders are the owners, and any project should generate sufficient cash flows to the parent to enhance stockholders' wealth. One exception is when the foreign subsidiary is not wholly owned by the parent and the foreign project is partially financed with retained earnings of the parent and of the subsidiaries. So MNCs will normally require forecasts of the financial characteristics that influence the initial investment or the cash flows of the project. Those factors include initial investment, price and consumer demand, costs, tax loss, remitted fund, exchange rate, salvage or liquidation values, required rate of return. The following several slides will introduce a multinational capital budgeting example. So the final step is going to calculate the net present value. So if the net present value is positive, we should accept the project. If the net present value is negative, we should decline the project. There are some other factors to consider in international capital budgeting. Those factors include exchange rate fluctuation, inflation, financing arrangement, blocked fund, uncertain salvage value, impact of project on prevailing cash flows, host government incentives, and real options. The most important, we are do the scenario analysis using foreign exchange rate fluctuation. So exchange rate tied to parent currency, or we use hedged exchange rate. Also, inflation should affect both the cost and the revenue. Now we come to a summary of this chapter. Capital budgeting may generate different results and a different conclusion depending on whether it's conducted from the perspective of an MNC's subsidiary or from the perspective of the MNC's parent. When the parent is deciding whether to implement an international project, it should determine whether the project is feasible from its own perspective. Multinational capital budgeting requires any input that will help estimate the initial outlay, periodical cash flows, salvage value, and a required rate of return on the project. Once these factors are estimated, the international project's net present value can be estimated, just as if it were a domestic project. It's normally more difficult to estimate cash flows for an international project. Exchange rates create an additional source of uncertainty because they affect the cash flows ultimately received by the parent as a result of the project. Other international conditions that can influence the cash flows ultimately received by the parent include the financing arrangement, parent versus subsidiary financing of the project, blocked fund by the host government, and host government incentives. The risk of international projects can be accounted for by adjusting the discount rate used to estimate the project's net present value. However, the adjustment to the discount rate is subjective. An alternative method is to estimate the net present value based on various possible scenarios for exchange rates or any other uncertain factors. This method is facilitated by the use of sensitivity analysis or simulation.